C60 olive oil is a popular choice for people wanting to activate their full potential. Improved sleep, faster recovery, and more energy are just a few of the amazing comments received from our customers who take a spoonful a day. Make C60 oil a part of your daily routine and see what it can do for you. Activate your potential today at thec60company.com.
I'm going to start with the subject of Iran because of what an example the last week has been in how this coordination, not just against a country, but for a agenda, works. I mentioned in last week's public videocast how the part of the strategy in targeting countries that you are struggling to make a case to actually invade is to put your agents and operatives in a country and get them to generate unrest against the government, against the regime. This is what, of course, the so-called Arab Spring was all about. It was about, in places like Egypt, removing the government and replacing it with a military state, as they did, by getting the people to do it for you. And part of this strategy is to impose sanctions on the country, which brings economic deprivation. And then you start developing and triggering the unrest, which the population, the protesting population, think is actually being generated from the population as a response to what is happening, when actually it's being pump primed by those that answer to external forces. And the idea is that you then build and build and build this unrest to the point where you remove the government. And here we have, Donald Trump, who got elected by saying he was against all these regime change wars, who's playing a central part in bringing it about in Iran. And here's the story. "Your courage is inspiring," Trump tweets in Farsi, backing Iranian protesters against Tehran government. US President Donald Trump has appealed directly to the protesters in the streets of Iran, wading into the grief and fueling anti-government discontent after Tehran admitted to accidentally shooting down a Ukrainian jet. "To the brave, long-suffering people of Iran," Trump said, "I've stood by you since the beginning of my presidency, and my administration will continue to stand with you. We are following your protests closely and are inspired by your courage. The world is watching," said Trump. "Allow human rights groups to monitor and report facts from the ground." This is from a government deep state in America that has targeted human rights groups all over the world when they are seeking to uncover and expose tyrannical regimes supported by America, even indeed installed by them. And the point is, and maybe, these protesters in Iran might have the penny drop eventually. Not that I'm a supporter of the government in Iran. I think the Iran regime is appalling, but not least in the way they, treat people for not being as they want them to be. But we need to look at things in a dispassionate way. And it's clear that they don't want to remove the Iranian regime to benefit the Iranian people or minorities or whatever. They want to remove it as part of a grand strategy to take control of the whole of Eurasia. And of course, as always, Israel is in there cheering them on, more than cheering them on. And so what we're seeing is these protests being to the benefit of what Israel wants, that which controls America and Israel. And in fact, neither Israel or America could give a damn about what's happening to people in Iran. Indeed, it is the Trump regime that is harming seriously so many Iranians because of the sanctions. So Trump is a fraud. I guess if you're in the alternative media, that part of the alternative media that that supported Trump, I guess it's difficult, you would see, to just say, actually, we got it wrong. This man's like all the others. But, just out of pure self-respect, the time is going to have to come when that conversation within the self is going to have to be made, because he's a fraud. He's a front for the same forces that were behind Obama, that were behind Boy Bush, and so on. And again, another classic. We, of course, had the weapons of mass destruction lie to justify the invasion of Iraq and the catastrophe that's followed. But Trump came in saying, I was against that war. Well, the evidence is that he probably wasn't. And he said that it wouldn't happen under his presidency. And of course, that got him a lot of votes from people who were sick of this whole outrageous abuse of people in the Middle East and abuse of people at home through all the money spent on these foreign wars. So the technique is that when you don't have a genuine reason to invade a country, you make one up. Or you don't have a reason to do something that you want to do. You make it up. And so we had weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, classically. And now here is Defense Secretary Mark Esper saying that he didn't see specific evidence that Iran was plotting to strike 4 US embassies. Because that of course, was part of the... we had to take out this Soleimani military chief from Iran to protect Americans because they were plotting to strike 4 US embassies. They produced no evidence whatsoever. And so what they say is, the intelligence told us. Well, the way the deep state works of military intelligence, etc., is to tell the public via the political administration and to tell the president or the prime minister what is necessary to justify an action. So if they said, well, actually, Mr. President, we've got no intelligence that this guy Soleimani is planning to do this, that, and the other, so really there's no really excuse to take him out. Instead, you just say, well, our intelligence, Mr. President, or our intelligence members of the public says that he was about to do this, so this is why we had to kill him. I mean, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State for Israel, who's moonlights as Secretary of State for the United States, is always doing this. And so here we have the Defense Secretary saying that he didn't see specific evidence that Soleimani was planning attacks on 4 US embassies, as President Trump has claimed. Esper said on CBS Face the Nation that he shared the view that there was an existing threat against US embassies, as they represent the most prominent display of American presence in a country. But Trump made the 4 embassies claim as he was experiencing increasing pressure from Democratic, Republican, congressional lawmakers who have pressed for further evidence into the administration's thinking behind the attack. And so here we have Donald Trump, who's lying to justify acts that he was elected by saying that he wouldn't get involved in doing this. Oh dear, I feel sorry for Americans in terms of this presidential election in November, because their choice is between Trump, a frontman liar narcissist, and fraud owned by Israel, and the woke Democrats who will inflict enormous damage on American society. And here's another aspect of this Iran story. There's many elements of this week which all pull in these different strands of how this kind of works again and again and again in situation after situation. Trump administration planned killing Soleimani for 18 months before the deadly strike and devised a cyber attack to cripple Iran's oil industry in case Tehran retaliated. And this is a a country, an administration, a permanent government in America, just uses different frontmen, that claims to be the good guy of the world, the John Wayne, the tough good guy fighting for freedom, justice, which, of course, the last thing it is doing is either of those. It's seeking to destroy freedom and destroy justice as part of a global agenda that is being driven from outside America through its operatives and agents in America. And it's becoming clear and clearer and clearer that Trump is just the latest mask on the same face. And another aspect is that you don't care what the people you were supposed to be elected to represent think. You just don't care because you're following an agenda, and that's what you follow. That's the motivation. And what the public think about that and elements of that as you go along the road doesn't matter. If the opposition gets too great, then you have to deal with it in some way. And of course, one of the ways that it's done in terms of Iran, quite blatantly, is you lie to the public about what's happening and why you had to do something. But here's a new poll saying that most Americans oppose Trump's Iran agenda. All nations are unwilling to subordinate their sovereign rights to US interests are on its target list for regime change, this story says. US policies towards them are based on big lies and mass deception. Absolutely right. Throughout the World War II era, the post-World War II era, all US hot wars and by other means were against non-belligerent countries threatening no one, from the North in 1950s Korea to the present day. All nations that the US doesn't control are on its target list for regime change, notably Russia, China, and Iran, which I've been writing about for decades. And now we have a new ABC News poll showing that 57% of independents and 56% of all adults surveyed disapprove of Trump's Iran agenda. A majority, 52%, believe Soleimani's assassination made the US less safe, clearly, and 56% of all US adults surveyed disapproved of Trump's Iran agenda. And 25% said the country is more safe, which is kind of ludicrous, and 22% said it had no effect either way. So you have a public that is sick and tired of regime change wars that are being funded to the tune literally of trillions, while the American population suffer back home from economic deprivation because they don't care. It's not about that which they represent, it's about that which they are pursuing, which is an agenda of a cult that couldn't care less about Iranian people any more than it could care less about American people. Then you've got another aspect of this. Study finds bots and MAGA supporters, Trump supporters in other words, Make America Great Again, pushing hashtag Iranians detest Soleimani. The hashtag Iranians detest Soleimani has been trending on Twitter this week as users voice their opposition to the recently assassinated Iranian military leader. The hashtag remained one of the most popular among users in the US and Western Europe, but similar viral sentiment was not expressed across the Middle East, least of all on Iranian Twitter, leaving one to wonder, the article says, who are these Iranian Soleimani haters? The story became stranger still after Middle East and social media disinformation expert Professor Mark Owen Jones of Hamad bin Khalifa University in Qatar analysed the trend. Jones studied 60,000 tweets from nearly 10,000 accounts using the hashtag and found that the most common phrases in those users' biographies were "Make America Great Again" and "Trump," not somebody noted for his support among Iranians or Muslims more generally. He concluded that once again that the online right-wing MAGA movement is boosting the trend that seeks to indicate that Iranians actually hated Soleimani. Jones also studied the most frequent users of the hashtag, those who were ferociously voicing their opposition to the recently slain general. He found that they had typical machine-generated usernames with a common first name followed by a string of numbers and had extremely generic profiles with little personal data and default plain displays on their page. This is an increasingly common occurrence in conflicts as groups attempt to control the narrative on the new online battlefront. In November, during the midst of a US-backed coup against President Morales, thousands of newly created bots boosted a Spanish-language hashtag in English, meaning "there is no coup in Bolivia," and attempting to legitimize the outing of a democratically elected leader. In Venezuela, too, the local US-supported opposition attempted to increase their popularity and reach through manipulation of Twitter. In October, a senior Twitter executive, Gordon McMillan, who was the editor for the platform for the Middle East and North Africa, including Iran, was unmasked as an officer in the British Army's 77th Brigade, a unit dedicated to psychological operations, propaganda, and online warfare. These incidents are some of the many that underline how governments and other powerful organizations increasingly see the internet as a battlefield for public opinion. So, when you start to make the connections, you have the internet giants that are owned by this cult. You have the American administration owned by this cult. You have the Israeli administration owned by this cult, and so on and so forth. And so the Silicon Valley corporations are involved in pushing an agenda, as the American government is, and the Israeli government is, and the media is, again, owned by the cult. And it appears that a particular story or opinion or the way things are is coming from all angles. When in fact, when you go back to source, you find that it's the same core group that is putting out this propaganda through all these different areas and agencies that it controls. And social media, I mean, when you put something on social media that is against the system, how many of the people that kind of then come and attack you are actually really members of the public giving you a genuine opinion? It's been well exposed that Israel has a center, a cyber center at Beersheba, where people in uniform, literally military personnel, and students who are paid to do this, are on social media all the time attacking people who are exposing or criticizing Israel. And it seems, there's this big wave of attacks on this person who's criticized Israel, anti-Semitic and all this stuff, when actually it's coming from Israel itself. And of course, technologically, it's done now, so one person can actually multiple post in many different areas of social media at the same time. And I don't go into social media very much. The Gareth posts news stories every day from the site to circulate this information, but I don't get involved myself because I've got other things to do. Like I'm writing a book at the moment, and that's more productive for me than going on social media and having a to and fro argument with someone who might even be operating out of Beersheba. So I don't go there. But it's being used more and more to direct public opinion by making it appear that it is public opinion. And of course, if you go from their point of view too far in exposing it, then they just delete your page or delete your video channel, which is of course happening all the time now. In fact, we had a communication from someone this week saying that they'd been sent a kind of online survey from Facebook, and the whole survey were questions about davidicke.com. Why would they do that? Anyway, big tech joins in. This is another aspect of this Iran story. Big tech firms are now joining Trump's all-out war against Iran. The reason I'm going through this subject of Iran this week is this very system of how the propaganda for the agenda works. It seems to be coming from all angles when actually it's coming from the same source ultimately. So Silicon Valley giant Facebook announced that it would be deleting all positive posts against recently assassinated, or about recently assassinated Iranian General Qasem Soleimani on its platform and its subsidiary Instagram. So here we have a platform that is most blatantly censoring opinion. It's pushing one opinion and censoring the other. Now that is propaganda, and that is politicizing social media. And of course the fake news and all that stuff, hate speech, all being used to censor. And yet Facebook is being treated in terms of regulation as if it's just a platform for the free flow of information and opinion, which is why it has legal protection from being brought into lawsuits about what's posted on its platform. But it's not acting as a independent means for the discourse of opinion and information. It's acting as if it's a publisher that's deciding what goes on its platform and doesn't, which means that it doesn't justify the regulatory protection that it gets.